Welcome to the Dark Souls speedrunning guide. In this video, I'll show you the basics you need to know in order to make good use of this powerful timing tool called Livesplit. This part of the guide will be split into two videos. In this first one, we will look into how to download Livesplit, how to create splits and set them to split automatically, how to add the components I think are the most useful to the layout and how to tweak them, and also how to set up OBS to capture Livesplit with a transparent background. In the next video, I'll go into a more in-depth explanation of what all the different types of times and numbers are so that you can properly understand everything that's going on. Note that Livesplit is a tremendously complete program with a ton of different options, and if we were to look at all of them in detail, this video would go on for hours. Instead, I'm only going to show you the very basics, and from there I hope that you'll be able to tinker with it on your own to customize it to your liking. To make this guide easy to follow, I'll be working with a completely clean installation. That way you can follow along the entire process, and I'll also keep my already set up installation on the side as a kind of end goal to look up to, so we can compare what we're missing as we go. To download Livesplit, simply head over to livesplit.org, go into the Downloads tab, and click on the latest release. This will get you a zip file with all the content of the installation folder. As you can see, Livesplit is a portable program, so you don't need to install anything. All you need to do is extract the contents of the zip file anywhere. I'm just gonna make a folder in my desktop for the purposes of this video, but you can put it anywhere you want. Once you have the files extracted, all you need to do is run the exe. The first thing you need to know is there are two main config files that Livesplit uses. One is the splits file, which is where all the information is stored, and the other is the layout file, which determines what information is displayed and how. For example, if I go to my main Livesplit installation, you can see I have many different split files which use the extension LSS. These all have different splits names with different times stored, and I can cycle through them at will. Then I also have different layout files which use the LSL extension, and I can also switch between them the same way. To set up our splits, we right-click on the timer, select Edit Splits. This will open this window. Here we'll start by setting up our game. We will search for Dark Souls, select it. Once we do, you'll see that the layout changes slightly. Next, we can skip the run category. This is only aesthetic. You can set it to whatever category you plan on running. It's not important for now, so we'll just ignore it. For Dark Souls, the timer should always start at 0 and the attempts are not really relevant. Next, down here is where we set our splits names. For example, I'm just gonna add a couple of them and do like Asylum, Valley, Andre. I'm not gonna do all of them, but you get the idea. You just add more and fill in the names. If you want to add icons to the splits like I have on my main splits, you will need to get the images and downscale them, and then from here, you double click, find wherever you have them stored and select them. Same goes for the game icon, which you can see here I have set to dark sign. You would do it from here. Okay, now for the important part, which is SoulSplitter. SoulSplitter is the plugin that we use to split automatically. It already comes pre-installed with Livesplit these days, so you don't have to worry about having to download anything extra. All you need to do is come here and click Activate. When you activate it, you will notice that the entire interface will shrunk down considerably. This has to do with the way SoulSplitter works. It adapts the entire layout of the entire program. Now, once it's activated, we go into settings. Here you'll have both boxes ticked by default. Start automatically just means that when you start a new run, the timer starts automatically on its own. You don't have to click a hotkey for it to start. As for the reset inventory indexes, this game has a system of indexing that remembers the last item that you equipped in every slot, so that the next time you access that slot, it will put you on that position. So for example, if you equip the 4th weapon in the list on your right hand, the next time you access the right hand slot, it will be selecting the 4th item and you would have to scroll up or down to select a different weapon. This indexing carries on through different files, through different games, as long as you don't reset the game. And this is annoying because when you start a new game, you want the indexes to be completely fresh. The only way to get around this is to restart the game, to close the game and start it again every single time that you reset a run, or using this plugin. So I highly recommend that you leave this on. As for the auto splitting, the way it works is you need to tell the program what kind of event you want it to be looking for. That would be the what. and when it should split according to that event. For example, if we wanted to split immediately when we kill a boss, we will tell it when immediately, what when I kill a boss, and then we have to tell him which boss that is. So for example, if I wanted to split when I kill Asylum Demon, I say immediately when I kill Asylum Demon. And then we would click plus, and it would add that trigger to the list. So whenever we kill Asylum Demon, the program would automatically split for whatever split is active at the moment. Usually we like to set it up so it splits during loading screens because that way it's a little bit more consistent since the in-game time pauses while loading. So you'll notice that most of my auto splitters are either on loading or on warp, which is also a loading screen. So if we want to stick with that, we'd want our Asylum Demon split to be done in the next loading screen after we kill him and not immediately when he dies. Usually in speedruns, we quit out when opening the big door on the Asylum, so that's a great opportunity to split. In order to do that, the obvious thing would be to go here and select when the game is loading instead of immediately. And again, when I kill a boss, Asylum Demon. This would work for most bosses in the game, but for Asylum Demon in particular, it will not work for most routes because in most routes, we kill Asylum Demon with bombs, and after killing him, we go all the way around, we quit out to break the wall into Oscar, and after talking to Oscar, then we go and open the big door and quit out again. So if we did this, we would be splitting when we go talk to Oscar and not after we've opened the door. To get around that problem, what we do is use the flag, as you can see here on my main splits. We use the flag for the door opening instead of using the boss kill itself. So the when would still be when the game is loading, but instead of when I kill a boss, we set it to when I trigger a flag. Here we would type the flag in question, which is 11810110, then give it a name like Asylum Door. This way, the auto splitter will split when the game is loading after this flag has been triggered. Now we just need to remove the other two so the game doesn't split a million times, and there you go. The other more common way we split on a loading screen after a boss is waiting until we warp, either by using a homeward bone or a bonfire. The principle is the same, but instead of choosing when the game is loading, we select when I'm warping after I kill a boss, etc., etc. You can do all kinds of different things for the auto splitter, just get creative. And if at any point we're setting this up and you have no idea what to use to split for a certain segment, feel free to ask on the Discord server and people will tell you what they use and give you ideas of how you can set it up. When we're done setting up our splits, we want to save them by clicking OK here, right click, save splits as, and here you can rename the LSS file however you like. Now that we have the split set up, we're going to work on the layout. Before going into it, however, I recommend that you do 3 or 4 fake runs just to get some numbers and colors going so that you can actually see what you're affecting with the changes that you make to the layout. Remember that you'll need to compare against real time, otherwise the timer just won't start because it will be waiting for the game to be going. When you have your Livesplit full of colors and numbers like mine here, right click on it and go to Edit Layout. These are the 4 modules that are shown on Livesplit by default. You have the title, which shows the game name and the category, just like it does in mine. It also by default shows the number of attempts and an icon if you're showing that. You have the splits, which is the most of the layout. This is where you see the times and the deltas and the split names and the icons if you have them. Then you have the timer, which is the big timer on the bottom, and the previous segment module, which shows you the difference in time compared to your gold or your PB, or you can set it up to compare it against different things. When it comes to modules, this is obviously up to completely personal preference. So I'm not going to tell you go ahead and do this, but I'm going to show you which modules I like to have. So to begin with, I like to have a detail timer instead of the normal one. The detail timer has a second smaller timer underneath it, which in addition to the overall time of the run, it also shows you the time of the segment, and you can set it up to also show the average time and the goal time as well, so the viewer can get an idea of how well you're doing not only in the whole run but also in that specific segment. So let's begin by removing the normal timer by selecting it and clicking minus, and then we will add a new module by clicking the plus button and looking for it in the drop-down menu. Since what we want to add is a timer, we will look into the timer and then select the detail timer. As you can see, this one shows you the time for the segment, and as I mentioned, the average and best times for that segment. And then we can rearrange it by dragging it around or using the arrow keys to move it up or down. Another module that I like to have is this possible time save. This tells the viewer how much time you have to save in the segment by comparing the segment time on your PB against your gold and subtracting the difference. So for example, if your PB is 5 minutes and your gold is 4 minutes and a half, it will tell you that you can save 30 seconds on that segment. Once your segment timer gets past the 4.5 minute mark, it will start going down because you can no longer save those 30 seconds, and it will instead compare your current segment time against your PB segment time. You will find this one under information and possible time save. And lastly, I like to have a best possible time module. What this does is basically it takes your current time in the run and looks at the goals of the remaining splits that you have ahead, and it tells you, okay, your time is this, and if you match your gold for every single segment remaining, the best possible time that you can get if you run as perfectly as possible is this. Of course, when you haven't started the run, this number is just the sum of best. It's just the sum of all your golds, which is also relevant information for you and for the viewers. I feel like this is the most important thing that you can have because it tells you how alive the run is. Because, for example, you're in the middle of the run and you're like 20 seconds behind, but you look at your best possible time and your best possible time is still like a minute ahead of your PB. And you're like, okay, I'm behind currently, but if I play really well and I get lucky, I can still PB by a lot if I get close to my goals. So I think this one is a very important one, and that's the reason that a lot of runners use it. To add this one, however, you will not find it as best possible time. Instead, you will need to add the run prediction module, double click it, then switch from current comparison to best segments. This will change it to best possible time instead of current pace. As you can see, there are a lot of modules that you can add, a lot of miscellaneous things, not only timers, but like visual things like separators, indicators, media, graphs, like videos. You can add all sorts of things to Livesplit. These are the ones that I like to have. So again, feel free to experiment and customize your Livesplit as the way you want. But this is how I like to display mine. I like to keep it simple, not too many things, but also have enough information for the viewer and for me to have an idea of how the run is going. Now that we have the modules that we want, let's go into the layout settings and start getting them to look the way we want them to look. In the layout settings menu, you have multiple tabs. The first one is the general settings for the overall layout, and then you have one tab for each module. We're going to take a look at each one of them individually. The first one, you can set the overall background color. You can either change the background as a solid color, or you can set a gradient. You can also set an image. We're not going to look at the background too much because I'm going to show you how to set it up as a transparent background on OBS later, which is what most people prefer to do, but we're going to look into that later. The opacity slider is for the overall thing, not just the background, but like everything. If you set it to minimum, it just turns everything invisible. You can also change all the fonts. We're not going to change anything, but just know that if you want to change the font for the numbers or the text, it's from here. There's 3 groups of fonts you can change individually. The timer one affects only the numbers on the big timer. The times group affects all the numbers everywhere else on the layout. And the text group affects all the text everywhere else. Here you can also change the colors for the splits. As you can see, by default, you have the best segments are gold, as you can see here. When you're ahead of your PB and saving time, you get a bright green. When you're ahead of the PB but losing time, you get a softer green. Same for when you're losing time. When you're behind on your PB and also losing time, you get a bright red. But when you're behind but saving time, you get a softer red. And then you can also change all the different colors, the text colors, the separators, everything else. Here you can also set the window to be always on top or not. Then we have all the tabs for all the modules on their own. These are all pretty straightforward. Most of them let you change the background color for that module specifically. So for example, for the title, you can set it to a different color only for the title. We're gonna set them all to be transparent, so they just match the background color of that we have set up, but you can change that and do whatever you want with it. All the modules also let you override the font settings that you set here. Here's also where you change if you want to show the attempt count, if you want to show the category name. As you can see on my main Livesplit, I'm showing Dark Souls and the category, which is any percent no wrong warp. You can also show the amount of finished runs. You can also set the game icon to show, and you can also say change other stuff. The splits tab is by far the most important one, since that's the component that takes like 90% of the space of the whole layout. The one thing that you'll probably want to jump straight into adjusting is the total splits count. You can see here that we have all this space in the middle wasted with nothing. That's because by default, the layout is set to display 16 splits, but we only have 9 splits. So there's 7 of them that are just blank. So the first thing you want to do is reduce this number to at least match the total amount of splits you have, so you don't have that empty space in the middle. If we had more splits than the ones we want to display, for example, here we have 9, but if we're running something with like 20 splits, we are likely not going to display them all. Or if we want to have like a very minimal layout, if we want to display only 4 of the 9 splits that we have, it will only show 4 of them and it will scroll as we go along. So for example, when we start the run, it will show the first 3 and the last. And as we go from the second to the third split, it will scroll to show the next one and then the next one and so on until it reaches the end. By default, it will always display the last split at the bottom with this separator until you reach it, and then when you reach it, the separator is gone. You can change that with these settings. For example, you can remove the separator for the last split. You can also tell it to not anchor the last split, so just go and in order until you reach the end. Most people like to keep the last split anchor at the end, so you can always see what the PB is, because the time of the last split is the time of your PB. The upcoming split setting only goes into play when you are scrolling. So for example, we now have it set to 1. So if we were on the third split, it will show also the fourth. And then when we go into the fourth, it will scroll to show the fifth. If we had it set up to 2, when we are on the third, it would scroll to show the fourth and the fifth. So it's always showing 2 in advance of where you are. We're gonna keep it to display all the splits for now, though. Here you can also change the bar, the appearance of the bar that showcases the current split. By default, it's set to this gradient of blue, but you can change it to whatever you want, to whatever color you want. Here you can set how many decimals you want to show. So if you only want to show seconds, if you want to show tenths, if you want to show hundreds. And here is the most important part. This is where you show what to display on the different columns. So by default, you have 2 columns. You have the columns with the time of the split, and you have the column with the delta, which shows you how much time you're saving or losing in comparison to that segment time. You can change these or add some however you want. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how to do this because there's like a billion different things and configurations that you can go through. But just know that if you want to add another comparison, you would add another column here and you would set it to whatever you want. So for example, the delta is the one that shows you how much time you're losing or saving. You can show the segment delta. You can show delta with you can do a lot of things here. Just experiment with it if you want. I'm not gonna go into all that detail. Here you can also change the current comparison. By default, it's going to be looking at your global configuration of what you're comparing against, but you can set it, for example, you can set different columns and you can have one column comparing against your personal best and then another column comparing against your best segment. That way you can always be seeing all the information. I personally like to keep it minimal and just compare against the PB. And if I want to switch the comparison, just do it on the overall layout, but you can do all sorts of things. Also, here you can set the timing method to always be real time or in-game time. I also like to keep it to current timing, but you can do whatever works best for you. As for the background, it's by default has this alternating background so you can see the splits better, but we're going to change that to be all the same color for the chroma key that we're going to do later. You can also enable or disable these thin separators between split. Again, I'm also going to disable them for the chroma. In the detail timer tab, we can change all the same things that we can change in all the other ones. Here with these sliders, we set the overall size of the timer, and we can also change the proportions of how much bigger the main one is compared to the segment one. The previous segment module is always set to compare against current comparison. I like to keep it always comparing against best segments. For the possible time save, same thing. You can change the comparison. I like to leave it to current comparison. And lastly, we already saw the best possible time module. We want to keep it comparing against best segments, so it shows us always the best possible time. And we also keep it transparent as with everything else. Remember to save your layout file the same way you did with your splits file when you're finished setting everything up, so you don't lose all your progress. Finally, before jumping into the OBS setup, I'd like to mention that in the settings menu from the main context menu, you can change the hotkeys for splitting, resetting, and all that. Now, when it comes to OBS, all you need to do to add Livesplit to your layout is add a window capture source. Well, I'm going to call it Livesplit 2 because I already have a Livesplit. And then you set it to capture the Livesplit that you want, match title, all of that. And there you go. If all you want to do is just capture Livesplit like this, and you don't care about transparency, this is all you need to do. Now, if you do want to set a transparency, the first thing you want to do is set the background to be a color that's easy to chroma key. So either a strong blue like this, or a green, or the one I personally like, which is this gray with a tint of red. If you want to copy, it's FF463F3F. Then what you want to do is go into your filters for your source on OBS. You're going to add a color key filter. And this one, you're going to set it to custom color and just either pick a screen color like this, or just set the hex code straight into it. And then you want to keep all of these values, the opacity, contrast, brightness, and gamma, the same way they are. You want to set the smoothness to 1, and you want to play with this so you get it to a point where it's not making your characters disappear, but also not showing any of the background. So for me right now, just setting it to the minimum already works. So that's perfect. But if it doesn't work for you, if setting it to the minimum, you're still seeing a little bit of the background, you want to play with this to see where you get it to a good point. But that's all you need to do. And that's it for this first part of the Livesplit guide. Now you should have all you need to start doing runs with your Livesplit setup properly. In the next one, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will go into explaining what all these numbers we've been seeing during the layout setup are and what they mean. So don't skip on that, because even though you can now use Livesplit, it won't do much for you to have all these times and metrics here if you don't fully understand what they mean. See you there.